are such a genuine gem. Thank you for clicking on my video. I'm Brooke McKenna, but today's case is the solved Lavender Doe case. And this was actually solved by internet sleuths in 2019. Now, true crime can be so intriguing and yet so heartbreaking because you feel so helpless sometimes. But I think with so much information and that we have at our fingertips, this case really shows you how much of a difference you can make and how big your voice can be if you want to help. And I think that that is just a refreshing reminder for all of us who watch these and can constantly feel like we can't do anything to help. I'm just glad I can share this with you today because this Jane Doe may have lost her name and her identity, but she would get it back, and her killer would be named as well. By the way, if you don't know who I am, I post so much content like this. It is my passion to tell these victim stories, and I mean no harm when I am doing so. I truly just want to share the light with them and to give them a voice when it was taken from them. So that is why I do this, and if you would like to join me in that, I would love if you would subscribe down below and maybe give this a thumbs up and comment something nice. It would truly mean the world. Now let's get back to this story. Now this case is going to be a little bit different because I can't tell you the victim and who she was, but that will come. You see, because she was a Jane Doe for many years. So it was 2006 in Texas, and two men were target shooting on a Sunday on an oil lease off Fritz Swanson Road, which is near Highway 31 in Kilgore. That is when they would come upon a small fire which was within the woods. Before they got closer, they wondered if somebody had set a mannequin on fire or possibly it was a prank for Halloween because it was October 29th after all. However, when they got closer, that is when the smell hit and they knew it was something much darker than that. Now, with both of their senses aligned, sight and smell, they realized they had just stumbled upon a crime scene. There was a body on fire in the woods, and these two men immediately ran to get help. The police rushed out there, and they found a young victim who had been killed, who had been doused in gasoline and set on fire just minutes before these men got there, meaning that her killer, the person who had done this, was probably in the area moments before this. And upon closer inspection, they could find that she was between 17 to 25 years old. She also had blonde hair with strawberry highlights. There was some sort of red in her hair. They couldn't identify exactly how because she had been set on fire. But she was between 5'3" and 5'5" and between 100 and 120 pounds. The victim was severely burnt, making identification other than that really impossible. And the clothes on her could be recovered though, and it appeared to be a lavender or a purplish, light purple sweater and a pair of jeans which were from the brand One Tough Babe and was between 7 and an 8. And also there was $40 in her pocket. Now, an empty gasoline can was also found at this crime scene, but she was taken in for an autopsy in Dallas where it was confirmed that she was a female and was thought to be of Middle Eastern descent. They unfortunately found semen inside of her, meaning that she was possibly sexually assaulted before she was murdered, and her cause of death was unknown, although they could find the time of the death, which was between 8:15 and 10 p.m. the previous evening. And the thing that stood out most to investigators, because she was kind of hard to recognized through just her facial features because she had been set on fire, but she had the most perfect teeth, no cavities, no nothing, and she even had baby teeth as well, which was very strange, the fact that she was thought to be between 17 or 25. Many believe this meant she was from a middle-class household. If you coupled the nice teeth with the nice clothing, she just appeared to be someone who had a family that had some money. Now, newspaper articles described this young girl and said that she was found. They were hoping to get all the information out there to hopefully have someone come forward and identify her in the area, but they didn't, so investigators had to do it themselves. They tried to match her with missing girls in the area, and they wouldn't rule anyone out until there was actual dental records saying that they were not this girl. There were many witness statements that actually said in the vicinity of the crime scene there were always very suspicious people, and it was even known as the killing ground. Now, weeks had gone by and investigators were not finding anything more to identify this victim, and so finally by that December they decided that a reconstruction was needed to identify her, and they had a forensic sketch artist sketch up what she believed that this victim would look like, and they also created a clay bust from that to give her a more 3D look to her. This was also released to the public, but no friends or family came forward, and by this time Miss Jane Doe was being called Lavender Doe due to the light purple color of her sweater. However, this wasn't a name given by investigators. It was actually by someone on a Webslueths forum that had been following this case and writing about it, and said that because of the color of her sweater we should call her Lavender Doe. And they also commented on the fact that she was wearing jeans that were the brand One Tough Babe, and she was, for what she had gone through. The next year, it was 2007, and investigators believed they might finally have a suspect in this case. He was 36-year-old Joseph Wayne Burnette, and he was a convicted sex offender who had lived in the Longview area and who was released from prison in 2005, meaning it was possible he could have been with Lavender Doe, and there had been a possible sighting of her with him. Now, where was he in 2007 when they finally decided to look into him as a suspect? He was back in prison. This was for the fact that he refused to register as a sex offender in his new home, and when investigators started talking to him about why he wouldn't register and all of that, they slowly moved the conversation to Lavender Doe and where he was in 2006 and if he knew her, and he was saying things that led them to believe that he had not only been with her at that time, but that it was also a sex crime. However, he confessed he was with Lavender Doe, but not that he murdered her. 6 years later, on October 12, 2013, investigators decided it was time to exhume her body from where it had been buried in Longview, and they were doing this for the National Center for Missing and Exploited Children, who wanted to do a digital 3D reconstruction of her face. It was going to be more accurate, and it was. However, still no one came forward until a mother would come forward saying that she believed Lavender Doe could be her daughter. You see, 2 months prior to Lavender Doe being found on August 3rd, 2006, 23-year-old Brandi Wells would disappear, and she had still not been found. She was from Longview, Texas. She was known for her love of music. She wanted to be a country singer. She attended Chapel Hill High School and then got a scholarship for the University of Texas, and she was just overall a great girl. However, everything would change in her life when she would fall in love her second year at university. Now, she got married and decided it wasn't really for her to be balancing work and a husband and school, so she actually dropped out of school to be a full-time, working wife. Unfortunately, their marriage didn't end up working out, and after the divorce, Brandi moved to Brownsboro to restart her life. She applied to Trinity Valley Community College, and she was going to be going to school to be a kindergarten teacher, and things really started looking up. She was focusing more on herself again. She had gotten a job at Walmart as well, and she just overall was doing what she needed to be the person she wanted to be. And the weekend of August 3rd, she'd gone home to her mother to just kind of stay the night, to see her mother again, to visit her. They were pretty close. So she would get there on the night of the 2nd to stay the night that weekend. Now at around 8 p.m., she told her mom that she was going to go out for a while and asked to borrow her mom's car, but her mom said, "My car's almost out of gas," and Brandi said, "Oh, well, that's the reason I was going to borrow your car, because mine's out of gas too, so I guess I'll just take mine and get some gas." And that's what she would do. Now afterwards, Brandi stopped at a local bowling alley where she could also get a drink, and the bartender gave her one, and actually knew Brandi, and so they got to talking a little bit, and Brandi was saying that she was going to go to Grand Central Station, which was like a club 45 minutes away from Longview, and this bartender allegedly was telling her, you know, don't go alone, not a great area, please do not go alone, but Brandi decided she would be fine. Unfortunately, that would not be the case. Around 9:15 a.m. the next day, on August 3rd, a highway state trooper would be along Interstate 21 when he would find an abandoned black 2000 Grand Prix Pontiac that was just abandoned on the side of the road, and he decided to run the plates to see if it was stolen. It wasn't, and so he just tagged it and he went on his way. However, he did not know that this would come into play in an actual crime investigation in just a little bit. 15 minutes later, Brandi's mother would be awake in her apartment looking around for Brandi because Brandi hadn't come home that night. Her Pontiac Grand Prix was not in the driveway. She decided to relax a little bit, not get so anxious, thought maybe Brandi just had too much to drink, stayed at a friend's house, and she would be back. However, that afternoon, Brandi's mother would get a call from Brandi's roommate who said, "Is Brandi still there?" And her mother said, "No, she's not. She hasn't come home yet." And Brandi's roommate said, "That's weird because she promised me she'd be back by this afternoon, and she's not." At this point, Brandi's mother, Ellen, went into panic mode, calling her daughter's phone over and over again, but it always went to voicemail. And that is when she decided she was going to go to the Tyler Police Department and report her missing, which is what she did. As soon as she did, she actually went all the way to the Grand Central Station Club to search, and there she wouldn't even find her daughter's car because it wasn't there, because it was on the side of the road where the highway state trooper had found it. Ellen actually had to go all the way to the Longview Police Department and report her missing there since it was technically their jurisdiction, but it was now August 8th and she had been missing for 5 days. And they still had no idea where she was. They finally decided maybe this abandoned car on the side of the road could have to do with her, and as we know, it did. They actually found the car with the driver's side open. They brought cadaver dogs, but they couldn't track her scent from the car as though she hadn't been there. Inside the car, they found her wallet, purse, and her ex-boyfriend's non-working cell phone, as well as a napkin with a man's name and number on it. Now, there was no sign of a struggle in or outside of the car, but the driver's seat was actually pushed all the way back as though someone much taller than Brandi had driven it. Investigators immediately contacted the man on the napkin, saying what he knew about it, if he could possibly be the reason that Brandi was missing, and he was very open about everything. He said that he had actually met Brandi at the club and offered to buy her a drink, but she declined and actually asked him for some gas money, and I'm not sure if he actually gave it to her or not, but either way, after that, they kind of separated, and he didn't know where she went after that. At this point, the Longview Police Department didn't know what else to do, so they called in backup from the FBI, and they went to Grand Central Station to look at the surveillance footage, and they actually talked to employees there as well, and they had said that Brandi had actually called the club several different times because she didn't know her way around the area and didn't know where exactly she was going, but she got there around 10:30. Then on the surveillance footage, they finally found Brandi, and at 10:44, she was swiping her card to buy a drink and was surrounded by a few men at the bar. Investigators put out pictures and descriptions of these men, hoping they would come forward to say if they knew anything about her disappearance, and also they had watched Brandi leave the club after having one drink, and she wasn't with anybody. Now, the phone that was found in Brandi's car that was identified as her ex-boyfriend's was thought, maybe there could be a connection that her ex-boyfriend and her had gotten together. However, they found that her ex-boyfriend was actually just deployed overseas, so there's no way he could have been involved. However, Brandi's phone was still missing, and they looked at her phone records and had actually found that 9 days after she disappeared, 2 phone calls had been made. These were 2 different calls made to 2 different people. So the investigators tracked them down, brought them in for questioning, and they both said that it was the same man that called them, who had said he had found this phone on the side of the road and started to use it. And so they found this man, brought him in, and said, "Why did you have her phone?" He gave the same story. They gave him a polygraph, which at first he refused, but then he did it and failed it. However, he wasn't considered a suspect. Now, investigators did worry that this case had something to do with sex trafficking because around this area was said to have a lot of it. Her family also put her picture out all over, anywhere they could, asking the public for help, but nothing was happening in this case. It was so stuck where it was. They sent emails and did interviews for paper, for television episodes, anything they could to spread awareness, and eventually Brandi's mother, Ellen, was sick and tired of waiting for investigators to do anything. She took it into her own hands. She decided to look at the surveillance footage that they had gone over by herself, and that's when she realized the person that investigators thought was Brandi was not her. Not at all. The lady they had said was Brandi was wearing completely different clothing, and you could see Brandi in the right clothing in the back of the frame, but she had also left alone. Now, by September of 2006, the search efforts continued and years had passed, but Brandi was still missing. In 2010, her mother would actually get a call from a man who called himself Tim and said Brandi was still alive in Kansas City, Missouri. But then he hung up the phone and never called again, and her mother could never ask him what he meant or why he was calling. Her mother kept hope alive for all of these years, and when the reconstruction of Lavender Doe came out in 2013, this was the first time she'd heard about Lavender Doe's case, and she had a fire ignited within her again. She immediately thought, could this be my daughter? Now, I'm guessing these cases were never thought to be connected for whatever reason, but that baffles me because Lavender Doe was found 7 miles from where Brandi's car was found, only 2 months after she went missing. Now, Brandi was a 23-year-old Caucasian female with brown hair and brown eyes. Her hair was slightly below her shoulders, and she had pierced ears and fringed tips on her fingers. She also stood between 4'11" and 5 foot and weighed from 120 to 130 pounds. All of these things were only slightly off from Lavender Doe, meaning this could be her. The only difference was Brandi was, of course, wearing a different outfit. She had a floral print, brown and cream colored tube top with a V-cut over the hip, and rust-colored gaucho pants with black strapless high-heel sandals with a floral applique. This was not a lavender sweater and blue jeans, but could she have been changed? Or forced to change? Investigators thought this could be too, and dental records were immediately tested between Brandi and Lavender Doe, and this would conclude that she was not Lavender Doe. I know. Reading up on this, really thought that they were going to say that she was, but she was not. Do you remember when I told you about Joseph Burnette, a suspect in Lavender Doe's case? Well, he had gone back to prison in 2007 for not registering as a sex offender, and he got 10 years for that, meaning he would get out in 2017. And he was. And this was when he was said to meet a 28-year-old named Felicia Pearson. And according to the Nowhere Dispatch podcast, they would actually start to live together in a rundown motel until July 20th, when Felicia would go missing. 4 days later, her body would be found in Longview, and it was found because her purple fingernails were sticking out of the leaves on the ground. Now, the next day, Joseph would be arrested, but not for murder, for failing to register as a sex offender once again. By August 21st, 2008, Joseph would actually confess to killing Felicia Pearson by strangling her with a rope, and then he dropped another bombshell. He had done the same thing to Lavender Doe back in 2006, but he didn't know her name either. He didn't know who she was. Joseph said that she had convinced him to get into his vehicle because she was selling things from a magazine, and he had refused that but said he would pay her for sexual activities, and she agreed. So she had gotten in, he had done the deed, but allegedly she had stolen money from him. And that is why he killed her, but left $40 in her pocket so that she could get the money she earned. He believed her real name may have been Ashley, but he had no idea. But his DNA was a match to the semen found in Lavender Doe. He was her killer. With a murder case technically closed, it was heartbreaking to know that the victim was still a Jane Doe, and that is why that year, 2018, the DNA Doe Project would get to work on Lavender Doe's case, hoping to identify her. Now, if you don't know, the DNA Doe Project actually is full of volunteers, anybody who wants to work on these cases to help identify victims who are Jane and John Does. This means internet sleuths like me and you who genuinely want to help in these cases can, and it can make a huge difference, because 3 volunteers who did not have a background in any of this, named Lori Gaff, Kevin Lord, and Missy Koski, began to work on the Lavender Doe case. They had never even met in real life, but they started working together on it. Now, because of this, Kevin had started taking private investigator classes. Missy was actually adopted, and she found her father on this website, which is why she was so involved in it. And Lori had always watched all the true crime cases, fictional, non-fictional, and she really wanted to help out with the real thing. So all of them combined got together and started working. Now, the organization actually raised $1,400 to analyze her DNA profile, and these volunteers searched through public records from MySpace profiles, and they did a lot of hard work on their own time because they wanted to help. And they eventually found she was of Czech ancestry, and they actually identified a descendant that lived about 30 miles from where her body had been found. Now, this woman was in her 50s. She had no idea what genealogy was, what they were trying to do, what they were asking of her. But eventually, when they explained it further, she finally said, yes, you can have my DNA to test it against Lavender Doe. And this came back to be a miracle, because not only was she some distant relative, she was actually first cousins once removed. So they just had to narrow down the family tree even more from there. An uncle of this woman had a daughter named Robin, and looking into this Robin, they found that she had died a month before Lavender Doe was found dead. And Robin was said not to have a very stable life. She was an alcoholic, she had been arrested several times, and she also had several different husbands, one of which had the last name of Dodd, and from there they could find anyone else with the last name of Dodd to possibly connect. And that is when they found Lavender Doe's real name. It had taken 12 years to identify her, but on February 11th, 2019, it was officially released to the public that Lavender Doe was Dana Lynn Dodd. Now, Dana was 21 years old at the time. She was between 5'3" to 5'5", with strawberry blonde hair, and her mother, who was Robin, had that, very unstable life, and had actually left her as a baby, so she didn't really deal with her mother. But her father was also homeless, and so Dana actually had to live with her stepmother in Arizona until she was 14. At this point, she was sent to Florida to be with family there, because she did have such a kind of a rough and rocky childhood that it had led to behavioral issues as she got to be a teenager. The family in Florida was actually her older sister, Amanda, who was 9 years older than her, who took her in. Amanda would be talked to about Dana and said that at this point, Dana became very different. She was hanging out with the wrong kind of people. She was doing drugs. She was becoming rebellious, and her sister couldn't handle her. She didn't know what to do, and Dana eventually ran away and actually decided to join a magazine sales crew that traveled around and eventually landed her in Texas. Her sister said, "I think after all the years she thought she had nobody. I think that's why she didn't reach out to us." Her best friend from that time, named Bobby Lynn Hodges, actually blames herself for what happened to Dana, because she said that she spent a lot of time with Dana, that they were the ones kind of doing drugs together and doing rebellious things, but they were like family. They loved each other. But then it got to the point where Bobby got pregnant and wanted to keep the baby and wanted to stop doing drugs, but Dana didn't. And so she basically decided that she was going to need to separate from Bobby, and Dana began to inject herself with heroin. She would steal things from Bobby, and Bobby had to kick her out because she was being so disruptive, and Bobby was now pregnant and had somebody else to think about. And the last words that Dana said to her was, "You're my last person. Nobody else will help me." It seems like Dana Dodd's life was, from the very beginning, a tough one, and that before she could become a woman that, you know, I'm sure wanted to be, and before she could really see a life past all of that rebelliousness, her life was taken from her. Now, thankfully, this case is solved. We know a killer, we know a name, and that is all beautiful. And the only thing is, Brandi Wells, who is thought to be Lavender Doe, still has not been found. So if you have any information, please contact the Longview Police Department at 903-237-1110. And I think that something we should all think about because of this case is that we have so much power at our fingertips now with the internet, with all of the information that is so readily available to us. It can kind of lighten the load when you're thinking about how many unsolved cases there are. And you know, if you're just watching the unsolved videos, what's that really doing? Well, that's actually doing a lot. It's spreading information. It's making you want to research more. It's making you want to help. And who knows, you watching right now could be the next person to solve a case. And that's not too far-fetched. That is not too crazy to say. You don't have to be a top investigator. You can be someone watching this right now that has a completely different field. You could be a teenager, you could be a mom, you could be a nurse. You could be anyone. And you could solve the case. And I truly hope, and I know, that all of you out there can do it and will want to do it too. And don't put a ton of pressure on yourself, but just know you have that power. And it's not something that just me doing these cases can do, or just somebody who's gone to school for this can do. You can too. Don't ever forget to speak up. Your voice is powerful enough, and I love you to absolute pieces. Okay? Bye.